Hello. Welcome to the Gem State Report. It is Friday, February 14th, 2025. We just finished up week 6 of the 2025 legislative session. Can you believe it's week 6 already? That is basically the halfway point. Now, they might go a little shorter, a little longer, depending on how long it takes to get through all the budget bills that still have yet to hit the floor. Well, that's going to be a flurry of stuff over the next 6 weeks. But this is generally about the halfway point. This is the day when all the committees said goodbye to their pages. Pages are high school seniors who take 6 weeks off to work in the Capitol. They're at least on one side, I know they're paid. I don't know about the other. But it looks like it's a great experience, sort of thing I wish I could have done when I was that age. You can always see them if they're in the House side, they're wearing their blue vests, and on the Senate side, they're wearing their red vests, scurrying to and fro, carrying papers and making sure rooms are ready, and sometimes doing tech support on the computers. But yeah, so the committee said goodbye to their pages because it's the 6-week mark. They're going to go back to their schools and bring on a new set of pages for the second half of the session. I will have a couple of representatives on today. I'm hoping to get Representative Barbara Ehart on here. It's been a big week or big month, big year for a lot of the endeavors she's been pursuing. The women's sports thing has been huge. She was one of the first to be taking that issue on way back, I want to say it was 2020. Maybe 2019. I don't know. It was quite a ways back. She sponsored the Protecting Women's Sports Act, saying that men cannot play on women's sports teams. And then that went national, got all that attention with Riley Gaines and such. And of course, last week, President Trump signed an executive order essentially codifying exactly what she's been fighting for. So I was looking forward to talking to her. We'll try and get her on. We'll see how it goes. A lot of the legislators have to travel back to their homes, and it's been quite a snowstorm the last couple of days here in the Treasure Valley, and that's making travel a little bit difficult. I do have Representative Lucas Kaler of Caldwell. He's got a much shorter commute, so he will be on in just a few minutes, and we'll talk about what he's been doing. He's a freshman senator from out in District 11. Then I've got a couple of clips and interesting things to talk about. Before I get too far, while you're still here, I wanted to come over here. Over in Pocatello tomorrow. After this, I'm going to bed and getting up in the morning and driving east for 4 hours. The Liberty Dinner over there in Pocatello is it's apparently a regular thing that they do. And I will be speaking about the session, what's happened so far, basically kind of what I'm saying here, except a little more formal. Hopefully fewer ums and distractions. But that's tomorrow evening at the Mountain Valley Baptist Church. That's kind of a funny name, isn't it? Mountain Valley. So I will be there tomorrow night, and I don't know if they still have tickets, but go to PocatelloChubObserver.com and you can see it pop up there. So that's going to be fun. It's funny. Had you let me close this down. Had you asked me in high school, or me even in my 20s, if I would someday be public speaking, going out in front of people, even doing something like this. Obviously, back in my 20s, there wasn't a such thing as YouTube yet. My late 20s, it came out. But if you'd asked me that I would go in front of groups of people and speak, I would have thought you were crazy. It was something I always struggled with in high school and my early adult years. I was always okay at writing, but getting up and speaking in front of people, it was very scary. But here I am. Go figure. So we'll have Representative Kaler on in just a few minutes, talk about the first 6 weeks of the session and some of the things that he's been working on. It's been fun being in that building, just as an observer. I can't imagine what it's like being an actual legislator, especially a freshman, because you're thrown into this world. You can prepare for it, you can plan, you can get advice, but then you're thrown in there, and bam, you're there. You've got to speak up. You got to make motions. You got to present bills. You got to debate, take your votes, and everything you do, you're like in a fishbowl. Everything you do is being studied by activists and voters and the media. It's definitely a different environment. Like I said, I'm there on the outside. I'm on the outside looking in. I just get to be an observer and watch it all play out. So yeah, we've got a lot of bills, a lot of stories. I've got some clips to play for you later on. House Joint Memorial 1, I think, is a big deal. It's a proposed constitutional amendment to clarify that parents are responsible for their children's education. We'll get into that. There's also a bill regarding public notices in newspapers. Right now, municipalities and counties and state agencies, they're required to publish certain notices in the newspaper. And the rates for that are set by statute, but that does mean that we are essentially subsidizing the newspapers by law. Now, there are some concerns about taking that away and putting it elsewhere on a government website, and we'll talk about those. Yeah, a couple other things going on. Obviously, I guess I should have loaded up this clip, the big school choice bill. Here, let me load it up while I'm talking, because I testified. Let's see, where is it? There it is. All right, hopefully you can still see me while it's loading on the other screen. That's the, one of the oddities of being my own producer. I am I'm doing both the talking and the clicking. Some of these fancy shows, like when I'm on with Matt Edwards on Idaho Signal every day at 11:30, which I hope you catch every day. He's got a couple of producers working back there, so that's great. So maybe someday I'll be there. So yeah, I'll upload that. The school choice bill. Obviously, there is there's several school choice proposals coming up. The governor said in his State of the State address that he is willing to put forward $50 million for school choice as long as it's accountable, fair, transparent, etc. And so that's kind of created a little scramble as different people try and craft bills. Now, the one that's got most of the support is House Bill 93. It's sponsored by Representative Wendy Horman and Senator Lori Den Hartog. And it is, it's the $5,000 tax credit. I've talked about it before. You've read about it before, and you'll get to see my testimony here in a minute. But that's the one that everyone's coalesced around. Most everyone. Obviously, there's still debate. That Senate vote next week is going to be very close. But then there was another bill today from Senator Dave Lent. He's the chair of the Education Committee over in the Senate. It's Senate Bill 1025, and that one is a lot more strict. It essentially takes the Empowering Parents Grant and expands it to cover private school tuition. But it puts a lot of restrictions on those private schools. It says they're not allowed to discriminate. Now, while that might sound nice on its face, imagine you are a private Catholic school. Should you be able to enroll a child who comes from a family of a different religion or atheist? What if part of the school is requiring that you have you follow the teachings of the Catholic Church? That sort of thing rubs people the wrong way because ever since the 1960s we've been trained to believe that any form of discrimination is bad. But discrimination is really just freedom of association. You choose to be around the people you want to be around. Now, obviously, I think there should be some threshold, and usually it's handled in public opinion. If a business, for example, were to start turning away people of a certain skin color or a certain religion, they'd probably get a lot of bad reviews. They'd get a lot of negative attention. People would stop going there. People in America today are really not racist and bigoted. But then it gets taken too far where you have like that Colorado bake shop where, LGBTQ activists continually harassed him, basically demanding that he do things that he did not want to do, write things on his cakes that he did not want to write. And so he said, you're fine to buy things from me, but I'm not going to do this for you. And they sued him. That's where you get the bake the cake bigot meme. And that's obviously anti-discrimination taken way too far. So should the government be able to tell private schools that they have to take everybody who applies, even if they don't conform to the school's philosophy or religious beliefs? Well, obviously, no. Now, the question is, should they have to if somehow there's public money involved? And that's really one of the questions. And I'll tell you more about that here in a few minutes. Obviously, grocery tax was big. There was a debate on the House floor this morning about a bill to expand the grocery tax credit. And that ended up passing. That's something that the legislature has done every couple of years for the past 20 years or so. They keep raising the credit up and up and up. Obviously, a lot of people want to see grocery tax itself repealed, the sales tax on groceries eliminated. And that's been a very frustrating debate for a lot of people, because that's ever since 2017, when the legislature actually passed a bill to do that, but it was vetoed by Governor Butch Otter. And that veto apparently wasn't even legal. So the law says, I believe it's 5 days, either 5 days or 5 business days after a bill lands on the governor's desk, he has to veto it or sign it. If he does neither, it becomes law without his signature. We don't have a pocket veto in the state of Idaho like we do at the national level. So the question is, what is the meaning of desk? What is the meaning of possession? When does the governor actually have the bill to sign? You see, Governor Otter waited until the day after the 5 days, and then he vetoed it. And so there was a lawsuit, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you probably should have done it beforehand, but we're not going to intervene. Just don't do it again. More or less. I mean, that's my paraphrase. So, the one time the legislature actually passed a grocery tax repeal, it was vetoed by the governor, and the veto wasn't proper, but the Supreme Court upheld it. So there you go. Honestly, if I were thinking along the lines of conspiracy theories, I might think there's some sort of conspiracy theory to keep taxes on groceries in Idaho, because it sure seems that way. I am personally agnostic on the issue. I go either way. I think all these other states don't tax food, so why not get rid of it? But on the other hand, there are some good reasons. Over at the Gem State Chronicle, I republished essentially what was a long Twitter post by Ryan Spoon, an Ada County Republican, about why he opposes repealing the grocery tax. And he made some good points. He didn't make the points that you heard on the floor of the House today for people who supported raising the credit and opposing repealing the tax. He made a lot of other points. And so go over there and read that. It's food for thought. Again, I'm kind of agnostic on it. I'll talk more about the debate later. So let me close that and bring on Representative Lucas Kaler.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent.
So how's
How are you?
Yeah. How's it going? 6 weeks in.
It's good. Learning a lot. It's been a very interesting experience, rewarding. Made some good friends. Learned a lot about the legislative process, and yeah.
So what's I don't know where to start there. Obviously, I remember coming to your kickoff way back in December 23, and then you had a campaign for months and months. Won your primary, very close. And then the general, and then you're finally there. Do you feel like you've settled in after the first moments of maybe, feeling overwhelmed or overawed?
Yeah, I'd say I've settled in really well. I think the initial challenge, I think the first week that I was down there was trying to get organized, figure out the lay of the land and who was who and what I needed to do. And so that was kind of a big a culture shock there, I guess. But yeah, I think I've settled in real comfortably, and it's been a good experience so far.
So remind me, which are your committees? Which committees have you been on?
So I'm on the Health and Welfare Committee, Local Gov, and Commerce and Human Resources. And so far, the Commerce and Human Resources and Local Gov have been kind of slow this year, but Health and Welfare has been very active, as I'm sure you've been following.
Yeah, it's had the the Medicaid expansion sideboards bill, taking the soda and candy off of SNAP, and several others. Obviously, these things attract a lot of attention. What are some of the most interesting bills that you've seen come through your committees, or that you've had a chance to discuss or research?
I think interesting bills that have come through the committees has definitely been the the Medicaid expansion ones. I'm trying to think here. So the first week and a half that we were in session, going through health and welfare, there was a lot of rules that we had to review, obviously. But then part of the interesting thing about the rules process this particular year is that working with the zero-based regulation that Governor Brad Little put out several years ago, there's a big push to get rules put back into statute. And so we have done a fair amount of that, getting complete sections and sections of IDAPA repealed and one lined and put over into code. So that's been kind of an interesting experience, reviewing some of the changes that have come through and a lot of the stuff that's been repealed on the IDAPA side. But yeah, for sure, I'd say Medicaid expansion is probably one of the biggest ones that has been interesting, as well as just doing the deep dive into the budget and looking at the massively huge program that Medicaid and Medicaid expansion in particular has been.
Well, we'll come back to Medicaid in just a moment. I just want to touch on the rules thing. It's one of those things that's going on kind of quietly, but it seems like it's the sort of thing that needs to happen now to reform the system for for the benefit of future generations, moving all those rules into statute so that they're controlled by our accountable representatives, not unaccountable bureaucrats.
Right.
So on the Medicaid thing, this is one of those tough things because philosophically, as conservatives, as Republicans, it's in our platform that we don't support, especially Medicaid expansion, but we don't support essentially welfare for able-bodied working age adults, and we need to trim back these entitlement programs that have been around for 60, 100 years. So that's philosophically, but actually practically, what can we actually do about Medicaid to really trim that budget and get people self-reliant again?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that specifically. Going over a report that was published by the Health and Welfare Department in November of 2024, it gave kind of a snapshot of what Medicaid expansion looks like. And interestingly enough, while the number of participants is down from 2024 as compared to 2023, the budget has gone up significantly, I might add. But then looking at the number of, and remembering that expansion is supposed to cover able-bodied adults, right? Looking at the number of able-bodied adults that are currently on expansion and exact numbers, not off the top of my head, but rough numbers, there's over 101,000 able-bodied adults that are currently covered under the expansion program as per this report. Only 48% of them are in some type of employment or continuing education, vocational training, stuff like that. Meaning the 52% or 52,000 roughly of these people that are on expansion are not involved in employment or training. And I guess, talking about philosophical, to me, that just seems kind of like I feel like it's fundamentally wrong. I feel like it's a case of immorality, almost, you might say, that we have able-bodied people who are soaking up the taxpayer-funded medical benefits through this entitlement program, but they're not putting anything back into the system. And 52,000 people, Brian, that's a lot of folks. With this bill, House Bill 138 that we heard just the other day here in Health and Welfare Committee, I feel like if we were able to get this through, if we got it past the House and past the Senate, signed into law, and we were able to apply for some of those waivers to the federal government to put work requirements, and it's nothing that's overtaxing. It's a 20-hour per week or 20 hours of volunteer work per week. Just a couple of things like that to help incentivize people to get active, to get busy, give back to the community or be involved in the workforce, and then cap the program so that it's limited to 36 months. And help people get back into the swing of being in charge of their lives, take ownership of their lives. I believe that social welfare programs or entitlement programs just keep people enslaved to the government handouts. And I think that there's a very dangerous precedent that can be set by doing that, where that type of lifestyle is passed on from one generation to the next. And how do you break people out of that? How do we help people be ultimately free and independent as citizens of America, citizens of Idaho? And I think it's definitely a good push to, try to take small steps with this situation with expansion, starting to put up just a few side rails on it, and encourage people to take charge of their lives again. And I think this is a good direction to head with this.
What was it like sitting in that committee, watching hours of testimony as people are essentially saying? I mean, I was watching part of it, and one woman actually said that if you vote for this bill, people will die and blood is on your hands. That's what does it feel like to be the recipient of rhetoric like that?
It's kind of interesting. I have to say that it's difficult not to see the humanity behind it, right? You have to feel for these people. I mean, anybody with a heart doesn't want to hear the sadness coming from people that legitimately believe that if Medicaid expansion went away, that their son's going to die, their father's going to die, that they themselves are going to die, right? Like that's not. Those aren't warm, fuzzy, happy feelings, definitely. I think some of these people who came on to testify don't quite understand that there's multiple plans under Medicaid, right? And it was obvious by listening to some of the testimony that I think that some of the folks they didn't understand that Medicaid expansion doesn't apply to their disabled elderly parent or their child that under the age of 19 who's got some sort of disabilities or whatever. So I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what Medicaid program that they're currently on, but at the same time, it's kind of an interesting thing to hear so much feedback from the community about this. And I honestly was kind of shocked, to be honest, listening to all of these people that were testifying in favor of keeping the expansion plan. If I remember correctly, there was only one gentleman who came up right at the very end of this 3-hour hearing who said, what I was hoping to hear more of, and that's the argument on the other side of this thing, right, is what about the taxpayers who are funding Medicaid expansion? Maybe they're not taking part in any of these, entitlement programs, but yet their tax dollars are going to fund it not once, but twice, both federal and at state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's and that's always a perspective that we need to remember, is that it's obviously not free money. I think a lot of people liked the idea of Medicaid expansion because it has that 90-10 split, 90% from the federal government, but that's still our tax money, and our federal government is $36 trillion in debt. And I think it's, Fred Birnbaum has said many times that that's not going to last forever. And when the federal government has to start cutting back, what are we left to do here? And we need to somehow get I do feel it's really surreal to see so many people reliant on government welfare. It's that I don't think that's the way our country was supposed to be. I don't think that's the way we as human beings are supposed to be. But that's maybe there's something in human nature that drives that. But I could ramble on that.
And maybe one last thing that I could speak to about this, before we move on to another subject, is the sheer volume of emails, and I'm talking hundreds of emails that I have received from constituents all across Idaho that have been in various levels asking me to vote no against this House bill, right? And oftentimes there's accusations of you don't care, you just want to watch people die. You don't care if these people are homeless or if they're disabled or if they've got this or that issue. And no, that's absolutely not the case. Like I want to be crystal clear when I say that we have these entitlement programs and there's people who legitimately need and can benefit from those services. And I would like to make sure that we can keep those services available for the folks who legitimately need to have them. But I also have to, as a representative, I was elected to represent everybody in my district. I also have to take into account everybody else on the other side of this argument, the other side of this equation. Who's standing up for the taxpayer, right? There's, by and large, the working class families who, we're living through a time of historic inflation. Gas is still high, and grocery prices are still high. There's no, real projection that that's going to change anytime soon. Hopefully, under the Trump administration, we'll start to see a little bit of relief there with both of those things. But between real estate, mortgages, rent, gas, groceries, everything else, just across the board, like families are legitimately struggling. And for those who don't make, or rephrase, for those working class families who make too much to be on programs like Medicaid, they're having to fund their own health insurance through their employer or just on the side, through a private venture, and yet they're being asked to spend their tax dollars to keep funding this massively expanding program that is also known as Medicaid. And so as a legislator, we take we have the power of the purse, and we have to take the responsibility to, one, analyze the budgets that come through. For this particular case, we're talking about health and welfare, and we have to make a very educated decision about, as we move forward over the next few years, like, are we going to do something to start curbing this expansion budget, or are we just going to let it keep growing out of control year upon year to the point that the program is no longer sustainable and nobody is able to be covered by it, right? So those are all big decisions that we have to make at the legislative level. And I really try to remind people of that perspective, and remind them that, no, I don't want to see people die, but I've also got to take care of all the people who are funding the system as well.
It's Amity Shlaes wrote a book about the Great Depression called The Forgotten Man, saying that the forgotten man was not the poor person who needed welfare, but the taxpayer who's now being forced to pay for his own life and taking care of others. And that's usually the person who gets left out. Not poor enough to get on government assistance, but not rich enough to be able to do it comfortably or control the political process. The one thing that always has been ringing through my head the last few weeks, just watching the legislature, is the Thomas Sells quote that there's no solutions, only trade-offs. Wayne Hoffman used to say it. And I really see that. It's you see something, you think, hey, this is an easy question. It's an easy bill. Well, just yes or no. But then you dig deeper and there's unintended consequences and there's, vagaries about the wording. How, what are you doing to keep yourself, I guess, focused where you need to be? How do you decide, if a bill comes up that, maybe you have some questions about, how do you figure out how to vote on that?
Yeah, good question, and thank you for asking. So as we're getting more bills that are coming through, the focus for me has definitely been uh, to read the bill and to try to understand it as best as I can. And I'll be honest, there's some bills that, just dependent upon the industry that they pertain to, I know absolutely nothing about it. It's Greek to me, right? So I really try to do due diligence. I reach out to other, like the bill sponsors, for example, reach out to other Republicans and conservatives in the majority caucus, and just talk to them and say, hey, I've got some concerns about this bill. Like, this language seems a little bit vague, or I'm having a really hard time understanding what the intent of this particular section, this amendment is. Help me understand that. And and then of course there's multiple groups out there that do bill ratings. Everybody from Farm Bureau and Idaho Association of Cities to, of course, Idaho Freedom Foundation. There's a lot of different groups out there that rate bills, and everybody kind of has their own take on them. But I guess one of the things, or the primary thing that I try to fall back on is look for three things. Okay, the first one being is this bill and this amendment, does it pass constitutional muster? Is it in any way seeking to infringe upon the individual liberty of the citizen? And then past that, does this bill grow government? Does it grow spending? And I've noticed that the vast majority of the bills that we have looked at and voted on so far, they all have the same disclaimer in the fiscal note that this legislation does not increase any fiscal spending. And okay, I guess that's a good place to start. But I like to get into the actual bill itself and to read some of the finer print maybe, and start questioning when it talks about certain things that this amendment is going to need to do, whether it's the creation of a new board or a committee, or they're going to start trying to do like various things within the scope of this bill. Like, everything costs money, of course, right? So I really like digging into the details of some of those bills. And then I guess the last thing that thankfully we live in Idaho. Idaho is a pretty conservative place, and I think the majority of the legislators that we have down at the Capitol are pretty decent folks. Thank God we don't live in California. But does the bill pass the morality test, right? And for example, just throwing a wild one out there, anything that would any bill that would seek to bring abortion back into the state, obviously for me that's a hard pass. That's an issue of morality, and I would definitely have to vote against something like that.
Yeah, it's I do recognize, and I was saying at the top of the show here, I'm kind of in the easy position. I just get to watch y'all. I don't have to be the one sitting there making motions, making debates, and then finally voting, and then have everybody looking at me and judging me one way or the other. I get enough of that, but definitely not nearly as much as you guys do. And in the end,
Right.
though, no matter what the newspapers say, no matter what activists say, every one of you, 105, are just responsible to your own voters in the end.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you've been here quite a while. I don't want to take up all your night on a Friday night on Valentine's Day. I do appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want people to know, or where people can go to follow you and learn more about you?
Well, I think we kind of covered the basics with the legislative session so far, and I appreciate you taking the time to interview me over that. Yeah, people can follow me. I'm on Facebook, Lucas Kaler. That's my personal profile. I do post a fair amount of legislative updates to my personal profile, as well as my Kaler for Idaho Facebook page. And then I'm also over on X, formerly known as Twitter, at my name, Lucas Kaler, but my Twitter handle is at one, like the number one Nation _God208.
Let's see if I can make that appear on the screen. Oh, yep.
Yep, that looks perfect.
Yeah, I need a producer. Maybe one of those folks who needs volunteer hours for staying on Medicaid after this bill passes can come, produce my shows for me.
Right.
All right. Well, Representative Lucas Kaler, thank you so much for your time. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you back in the Capitol next week.
All right. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate your time. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, go follow Representative Kaler, and hopefully, if we can figure out the tech support, we're going to see Representative Ehart here before the show is done. But in the meantime, to cover some of the news that's going on, I pulled a few clips that I thought were interesting this week. Should I go with my own first? Why not? So the school choice bill. It's not perfect. No solutions, only trade-offs. But I think it's an interesting start. 2 years ago, 2023 session, Senator Nichols, Senator Lenny sponsored an ESA bill. That's Education Savings Account. It would have, for every student that came out of the public school system, it would set up an ESA, Education Savings Account, kind of like a health savings account. And they'd take a percentage of the money that would have gone to the school and put it into this account. And then parents could use it for whatever. They could use it towards educational expenses, say if you're homeschooling and you have curriculum or testing, or if it's tuition for a private school or paying a tutor in a micro school or just a kind of a one-on-one situation. It failed the Senate. I think it was a 12-23 vote. It was pretty solidly defeated. A lot of people didn't like it. You had kind of a split. You had people who didn't like it because they're essentially beholden to the public school system. They don't want anything touching that system. You saw that recently this last couple of weeks with folks who are endorsed by the Idaho Education Association voting not only against school choice, but against the bill to prevent unions from taking taxpayer money. So you had that, but then you also had the other side where people were worried about what it might do to homeschooling. The theory is that if people start taking money to cover homeschooling expenses, then eventually the government's going to come in and start regulating those things. And I get that fear. Actually, if you pop over, I'm going to do a rabbit trail here. What did President Trump call it? The weave. Over at the Citizens Alliance of Idaho X page, Twitter page, as part of my contributing editor duties, which means I come on every day, I also publish an article every Friday talking about something that's going on. And so this one, I'm talking about the history of compulsory education in Idaho and how basically our Constitution's a relic of relic is not the right word. It's a product of the progressive era, in which case people, especially Republicans at the time, that's what people forget. Theodore Roosevelt was the master progressive. They thought that we can use government to fix society. We've got problems, government can fix them. It's the opposite of what Reagan said, right? So one of those problems was that a lot of Americans were uneducated. Why? Because there weren't any real schools. I mean, you could go, some places, some towns had a schoolhouse that you could send your children to. You could pay for schooling, but a lot of families just kept their children at home. Boys learned after their father to do whatever their father's trade was, farming or smithing or, machinery or, whatever. Girls followed their mother, learned how to keep a house and, sew and do all those things. And so you had the consistency between generations, but you had, some communities where people just couldn't read because they didn't need it for their lives. So it never happened. And so our progressive founding fathers of our state figured, well, we need an educated citizenry. We need people who can maintain our republic. And so they decided we're going to create public schools for everybody. And they'll let everybody in, age 6 to 18 or whatever it was. You'll come to school and you'll learn. And then from there, you're on your own. And so that's why we have our Constitution, the stability of a Republican form of government, depending mainly upon the intelligence of the people. It shall be the duty of the legislature of Idaho to establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public, free, common schools. So that's in our Constitution. And then later on in the Constitution, it says the legislature may require by law that every child shall attend the public schools of the state throughout the period between the ages of 6 and 18 years, unless educated by other means as provided by law. So it's basically saying the legislature has the authority to enforce compulsory schooling, and that's truancy laws we've had on the books. Now, by the 1960s, they figured, okay, well, there's enough homeschoolers, people educating at home, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. But they were still concerned about what people might not be learning at home. Because at home, you just have parents. That you don't have the credentialed, educated, graduated, certificated teachers, right? So in the 1960s, they said you can homeschool as long as the local school district, the local school board can oversee it. Now, that's where you ran into the Shippey family. Three brothers were put in prison for homeschooling because they told the public school board to stay away. And they went to jail over it. But by the early 90s, Idaho passed a law saying, okay, you don't have to have public school oversight. So essentially, it just means that there's no regulation on homeschooling in Idaho, which is fantastic. And that is exactly why homeschoolers are so freaked out about anything that touches that. You have, you read about it here. You can go to the Citizens Alliance of Idaho. It's citizens_Idaho on X. House Joint Resolution 1. It's a proposed constitutional amendment sponsored by Representative Dale Hawkins and Senator Brandon Shippey, familiar name, that would change that compulsory education clause in the Constitution to say that the right of the people to educate their children without government regulation outside of the public schools of the state shall not be infringed. And former Senator Scott Herndon, in his testimony on this, actually pointed out the other day that that shall not be infringed phrase is deliberately meant to echo the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. It's a reminder that we, the people, have the right to educate our children. We can delegate that authority and that responsibility to the government, but it remains our right. So I'm going to go ahead and play my testimony on the school choice bill, which some homeschoolers are still concerned about it. I think it's okay, but we'll see how the debate plays out. So I'm going to play that and try and get Representative Ehart on here.
So Brian, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Brian Almon, and I am here representing myself today. A little bit about my family. I went through public schools in a rural community. My wife was homeschooled all through her time. My eldest two children currently attend a private Christian school, but my 5-year-old, we're homeschooling him this year for his kindergarten year. So my family has experienced many possible ways of doing school, many alternatives. I have a lot to say, but I'll try and condense this into 2 arguments. Why do we need school choice? Money following the student. It's clear from test scores and other metrics and testimonies we've heard here today that something in the public school system isn't working, or at least isn't working for all people. And I believe this tax credit will allow those who wish to try an alternative but are otherwise prevented from doing so the opportunity to do that. There will always be money for public schools. This bill doesn't change that. Every year we hear people in this building talking about unprecedented and historic investments in public education, and I imagine we'll keep hearing that. However, this bill gives families who want an alternative a chance to try that alternative. Second, I want to explain why I don't believe this is a threat to the homeschooling community. The bill does not mention homeschooling at all. It makes no changes to the protections that homeschoolers in Idaho have enjoyed for 3 decades. The only oversight of the tax credit comes from the tax commission. It doesn't give the Department of Education the ability to come in and regulate how you're homeschooling your children. Many people worry that government regulation is always followed by, government regulation always follows government money, that is taxpayer money. I believe a tax credit is the best way to make sure that doesn't happen. Consider the grocery tax credit. Idahoans take $120 per person in their household as a tax credit, and we don't see any government agency looking over our shoulders telling us what we can and can't buy at the grocery store. So it can be done. I believe House Bill 93 will allow families who want to try something new, whether private schools, micro schools, homeschooling, etc., the opportunity to do that. It provides necessary accountability through the tax commission, makes sure we're not cheating, and it doesn't regulate how we choose to educate our children. I believe it's the best of all worlds, a great start in reforming a broader school system for all Idaho students. I urge this committee to send this bill to the floor with due pass recommendation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Almon. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
How about that? 2 minutes exactly. The clip actually goes on a little bit. Senator Treg Berndt asked me a question about the tax commission communicating with the education department to verify enrollment in private schools. I had no idea what the answer was, so I deferred to the sponsors, and they answered it later. Now, Senator Burnt during that hearing actually brought up a problem that he had with the bill. Hold on. Still trying to get Representative Ehart on here. In that it gives schools the right to discriminate. And he says that that's a very important thing for him. Now, like I said, I believe, freedom of association. I think even with taking some of these tax dollars in the form of a tax credit, mind you, it's the money's, as numerous people in the hearing said, the money's going to the families. It's not going straight to the schools like the ESA idea would, or a voucher. I believe that's not a problem, but he does now, and we can disagree on that. But he's one of the votes that it needs to pass, and that's one of these things about the legislative process. It's you can have the most righteous cause in the world. You can be completely correct on whatever it is, whatever bill you're working on, whatever position you're taking, but you still have to convince everyone else. And every one of those people comes from a different background, comes from a different worldview, a different perspective. They come from from a different place rhetorically and morally and, spiritually and economically and everything else. And yeah, you can think maybe, okay, you're wrong, but at the same time, that doesn't actually help you pass the bill. That doesn't help you set policy. You've still got to convince them. And that's why, the process of making this bill, the reason this is the big homeschool school choice bill, not homeschool, it doesn't even mention homeschool in the bill, by the way. The reason why this is the big school choice bill is because it's got a lot of people been working on it, trying to get it to the point where it can make it into, make it past. You got to get it past a print hearing, a committee hearing, the House floor, Senate committee hearing, Senate floor, and then get the governor to sign it. That's a gauntlet. Consider what these bills have to go through in order to become law, especially big controversial bills like this. And so everybody involved that I've talked to has talked about making changes that are necessary to get other people on board. You got to get 36 in the House, 18 in the Senate, and 1 in the governor's office. So whatever you have to do to get that bill across, without, of course, handicapping or sacrificing the bill itself. Because if you go too far, then what's the point? It could become worse than nothing. Or like I mentioned, Senator Lent had his school choice bill, the Expanding Empowering Parents Grant bill in the Senate. And it was, in my opinion, not a good school choice bill. It put too many restrictions on private schools and anyone else who participated. And that one actually failed, 6-28, only 6 aye votes in the entire Senate. So we'll see what happens with House Bill 93 next week. It should reach the Senate soon. Still working on some tech support here. Let me play another clip for you while I work with the representative. This morning, Representative Jordan Redmond presented a bill for E-Verify. So this is an interesting issue. This is a federal program where you essentially take the documents given to you by a prospective employee and verify them with the federal government. It's kind of like a background check, but it's testing your citizenship and immigration status. It's supposed to tell the employer that, yes, this person has the right to work in America, either because they are a citizen or because they have the proper work visa. Remember, last year, the Dairymen's Association lobbyist said that he thought that up to 70% of their employees might fail an audit on those citizenship papers. So E-Verify, the point of it is to fix that so that, they don't come to work here in the first place, and businesses are not hiring illegal aliens. So let me play for you the introduction of that E-Verify bill by Representative Redmond this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Today I bring before the committee, my name is Jordan Redmond, representing District 3 in Kootenai County. Today before the committee, I bring RS 32084 that adds to Idaho employment law to prohibit employment of illegal aliens and require employers to use E-Verify for each new hire to verify legal employment status as a condition of their employment. 21 states have some level of E-Verify currently, including our state here in Idaho. By executive order, Idaho requires state agencies and public contractors and subcontractors that receive state funds to E-Verify. This RS fits in well with the new administration's agenda to correct the last 4 years of illegal immigration, as well as helping people that are here legally receive employment. The implementation of this bill won't take effect until January 1st to allow for employers that may have illegal aliens working for them find new staff that have legal status. Mr. Chairman, would I be able to defer some time to Senator Lenny, who's been working on this with me?
Well, unfortunately, we don't.
Okay.
In the introductory hearing, we just do the sponsor of the bill. So are there questions for Representative Redmond on RS 32084? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to introduce RS 32084.
Committee, we have a motion to introduce RS 32084. Is there discussion on that motion or further questions for Representative Scott? Representative Mickelson.
I would actually make a motion that we hold it in committee, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, we have a substitute motion to hold RS 32084 in committee. Is there discussion on that motion?
Point of order.
Yes.
Do we hold RSs in committee or do we return them to the sender? Or
You know what?
Director?
Having been here a while, I knew I could read her mind. She was wanting to hold in committee, but I knew it would be returned to sponsor. So
Return to sponsor, thank you.
the substitute motion is to return RS 32084 to sponsor. Is there discussion on that motion? Representative Scott? No. Representative Alfieri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering why Representative Mickelson would want to do that. What is the objection?
She doesn't have to state it if she
Okay.
wants to. You're welcome to state it. If you don't, you don't have to. It's just people can make a motion for any reason. You know, you could do whatever you want with it with an RS. So, committee, the substitute motion is to hold RS 32084. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Nay. The motion has failed. We will turn to the original motion, which is to introduce RS 32084. But before we do, would you like to be recorded on the record? Yes. So I've got Mickelson voting aye. I've got Shubin voting aye on the substitute motion, and no, not Achilles. Okay. All right. So we're going to return to the original motion, which is introduce RS 32084. Is there discussion on that motion?
Could I speak to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we asked.
I think sometimes it's better to fix a bill before you have to go have it bill numbered and then bring it back. I see some problems within this bill, which was the reason for my original, or my motion after Representative Scott's motion.
All right, so Representative Mickelson was trying to kill that bill. And if you know the history with her and the issue of guest workers and potential illegal aliens, then you can maybe speculate as to why. Anyway, Representative Barbara Ehart is here, so I'm going to bring her on without further ado. Representative Ehart, thanks for joining me.
Oh man, hi Brian. Sorry, I could not get in. I'm sure it was all my fault, but I finally made it.
Well, it's how these things go. The more complex they be, when they work, they work. When they don't work, then it's such a pain.
That is true. Anyway, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while. It's obviously been you've been keeping busy this year, but I guess jumping right into it, the whole women's sports thing.
Yeah.
You were standing alone at one point a couple of years ago, and now it's the president of the United States assigning executive orders. What's that been like?
It's been pretty gosh darn gratifying. It's not that often that a state legislator has an opportunity to make a national impact, and this really spoke to me. Obviously, those who don't know those who know my history. I spent 15 years as a Division I women's basketball coach at 4 fantastic institutions after playing Division I women's basketball, and so this, just watching what was happening in Connecticut with the Connecticut runners. And particularly Selena Soul, she really started it. It just, from my past experience coaching, I actually had anticipated this years ago, maybe not to this extent, but it was like, why wouldn't a guy want to identify as a gal during the day and get a scholarship and then I was thinking more as, go be a guy at night. The insanity of what's happened, especially where kids are concerned. Adults, I guess they can do what they want, but do your own thing. Don't force it on us. And I can support that, but not the kids. And certainly if you decide to do something like this, you don't get to just automatically declare, what you get to do because of it. You're a man, you got to stay in your own lane. But yeah, to see President Trump sign this, to see what's happened across the nation, it's been pretty gratifying. So, and it's there's been so many facets of it. I'm sure you'll ask, but from our Boise State women's volleyball team, Utah State, University of Wyoming, and Nevada, the support behind that. And of course, obviously, I was, initially behind all of that. So, and now we've got Senator Crapo and Senator Risch joining Senator Marsha Blackburn in sponsoring the legislation in the Senate on this. Our governor has been pretty gosh darn instrumental. Our governor was there. I should have been there. I was originally going to be there when President Trump signed that, but our governor was there and, got some shout outs and some kudos. And the governor was very supportive of Boise State. And, of course, on Monday, I was invited to his office where he did a proclamation, much like President Trump, declaring that the war on women is over, and certainly at least in Idaho for now. So it's been a unique experience, Brian, very unique.
Yeah, it seems like a whirlwind. Honestly, obviously, with President Trump being back in office and all the great things he's doing, it really feels very different than it did just a few years ago.
Whoa.
It feels like we're winning for once.
Yes.
It's a very strange feeling.
And in sports, we like to win. That's a key word.
Yeah, it's true. It's like you've had a losing streak for a while. The baskets just aren't going in. You're dropping the passes. Whatever analogy you want to make. And then suddenly, suddenly something clicks, and suddenly you're making your shots, and the team's just gelling together, and you start racking off a couple of wins, and it's like, oh, this is great.
Yep, and that was great. That's exactly what it feels like, and everyone around here has been so gracious. I'm not actually looking for accolades, but people have been very gracious towards me and expressing their gratitude and remembering where it started. But I'm confident in the work that we have done. The work's not over. I do need to say that the NCAA essentially pulled a fast one. They acknowledged that a new policy would be in effect, and that they weren't going to follow the state policies because those are haphazard, kind of punched together, which is completely false. So they acknowledged President Trump's declaration and that they would be doing that. So all of that was spot on. The next day, 24 hours later, it's like they come out with this policy, which tells me it was too fast, too soon. They had it waiting. Somebody already had written it up. And it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. It doesn't use the word sex. It uses gender and gender identity. And it gets us closer. And yeah, we've got more work to, as a matter of fact, on, was it Tuesday? I can't remember this week. It was Tuesday or Wednesday. And I missed a key vote on the floor, and I was trying to go in and out, and it was the medical conscience bill that actually Representative Young had started and Representative Skog, was carrying this year. I wanted to support that piece of legislation. That was awesome. And I'm on our coalition Zoom call with an important piece and then I hear, oh, they're doing it now. And they should have already called. I was too late, running onto the floor into my seat to vote, but the vote had already started. And so I went back out with my computer to get on my, with my coalition call. But what we were talking about was this very thing. And as we've been strong as a coalition, and, we kind of, somebody kind of signed off on it. We're like, we can't sign off on this. Riley Gaines was even on that call, who, she's in the middle of an NCAA lawsuit. And we can't sign off on this. So we still got work to do. And we knew that. And an executive order only goes so far anyway. We need to get it passed through, we need Democrats on our side to get it passed. So our work is still ahead. But Brian, it still feels like winning because good things have happened.
It does feel good to win. And win, people talk about politics, in very moral or high-minded terms, but in the end, it's all about winning so that you can implement your policies, which are, obviously we believe to protect traditional values and protect children and, make the world a better place.
Yep.
What are some of the other bills that you're working on along those lines?
Well, I have had introduced, although I have to re-RS it, and so hopefully I'll be presented it next Friday. One of them is a Women's Safety and Privacy Act. And essentially what that is again, putting it to statute, that men can't go into women's prisons. Men can't go into, meaning men who identify as women, into women's domestic shelters. And then the other part of it is making sure that at our universities, dorms designated as female dorms will remain female. And so I think it's another continuing important piece of the puzzle as we make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's. So we've got that, had to re-RS that. So you probably explained the RS process, but re-RS campus free speech. It's another one that's been out there and released. I've got and I brought it back. This will be really the third time as I try to get it going, but it is another parental rights bill on opting in to sexuality. And that's different than sex ed. I'm happy to, give sex ed up as it is, because in Idaho, we really define what sex education is, and that is basically the physiology and anatomy. So I'm happy to stay with that. But when it comes to sexuality, and we define sexuality, and it's all of what one might think, whether it's, gender ideology, whether it's, sexual abuse, pornography. I've got a list, and I'd read it off, but I can't find it right now. But so I've got that. That one has, both of the last two bills have made it constantly flew through the House side and got hung up on Senate, in Senate education. So we'll see if that happens again. And then I've got another piece of legislation I'm working with Marco Erickson on, and reporters like you, Brian, actually, this should be important to you, but it's the SHIELD law, and basically, and it's important to our First Amendments, especially when reporters do their job. We even have Greg Pruitt on board, but because we didn't leave it left to legacy media. It's anyone who's reporting. And when you have sources, right now, we've had people suing and subpoenaing those sources. And if a reporter can't protect their sources, you're not going to get the information, and they're not going to be able to report and do their work. And we had a real bad incident that happened in Idaho Falls. And actually in the last 8 months, the subpoenas have increased almost fourfold. And one of the disturbing parts of this is they're not all going after, the big, the Idaho statesmen. They're going after the smaller people like you, or maybe it's I'm just giving ideas. It could be Idaho Dispatch, where they don't have the money. And so instead of fighting, you just give up your sources, and it's not right. So we've got that coming. I've also have another one that was just introduced, so people will see it out there. But we have a problem in our cities, where our cities have really, for years now, since about probably 2009-ish, but our cities have been regulating our daycares. And so we're hearing all the time, right, that we don't have daycares, and now people or have been going back to work or can't find people to watch their children. And yet, who used to watch the kids in the 70s? It was, neighbors and people down the street, and you'd pay them a little bit. It was a win-win, because a lot of moms still stay at home and they would watch those kids. But when you get to a point where you're over-regulating and you're having to pay to have background tests, checks, and a license, people don't want to do it. And some of the regulations, I know what it is, Brian, because at my place of work at Club Apple in Idaho Falls, I also I run our daycare. That's one of the many things I do. I oversee that. And, I know how scrutinized it is. I'm like, holy Hannah. So we're going to basically deregulate to a large degree. We've been also working with Alex Adams, the health and welfare director. So people should at least know that this isn't something we've just come up with. It's a problem. And we see where our daycares, we'd had this many, as our daycares have just shrunk in number, the cost, that only stands to reason, right? The cost has just risen exponentially. And so of course we have a problem. But, when I look at what the national plan is from years ago, particularly more on the Democrat side, Arnie Duncan, who had been Obama's Secretary of Education. He talked about all this. I get a little skeptical sometimes. He wants to make the schools, a community, basically like community centers. And they, I've gone to some of these places. The kids at early ages, they'll pick them up, they'll go, they'll feed them breakfast. They already feed some kids breakfast. They'll feed them all breakfast. They'll feed them lunch. And when school is done, they'll help them with their homework. They'll take them to their activities. They'll even give them dinner. And then the parents can come and pick them up. What? To put them to bed? I mean, who's raising the kids? So, I have concerns all the way around. So with this daycare bill, we want to deregulate and make it possible if your neighbor is willing to watch your kids after school, because they're in school until maybe they just need them for a couple hours, 2 hours every day till they get home. So what? It shouldn't be the city saying, no, now you've got to get licensed. We got to see a background check. What responsibility has to rest with the parents on these things too? So I only say that right now because I know it's going to be interesting. It's going to, let's just say, I don't think the cities are going to like it. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know one of the things with childcare is pushes for more government help, more subsidies, more essentially welfare for childcare centers.
Yep.
So this is pushing it the opposite way. So yeah, they're
not that is correct. And I have met so many times with some of our good people in my area who have those daycare centers and working out of their homes. And in one of the conversations, one started to go that direction as far as money and subsidies. And I just had to say, wait. That everybody wants money, everybody needs money. That's not what I'm here to do. The area that I can help with will be deregulation. You're going to have to, not the money, but hopefully the deregulating will help, financially, if you don't have to go through all of these other hoops. So that would be the hope. And let me just throw one last one out there. There's been some problems over the last few years and even longer than that with our children. And as far as, the information that we've seen, the statistics we've seen is CPS and others, children are taken too easily out of homes and away from parents. Now, that's not to say that things don't not happen. They do. But our statistics are as high as 80% of the kids taken shouldn't have been taken. That is traumatic for kids. It's not right. So we have been working for the past year, and, me in particular, and our chairman Skog with Judge Ellis. And, he's helped go over some of the stuff that we have, but with legislation to clean up what the courts are often letter of the law, and some of the language that had been there for years is conflicting and confusing. And so with the judge's help on like pages and pages of the section where it's applicable is to remove that. And we're basically what we're trying to do. And we think there are more steps that are going to be needed, but this year, it's going to be to try as much as we can to make it possible that if there's ever a conflict where it is felt that a child needs to be removed because a potential parent is a threat, then if where possible, we want that parent to be removed and the child to stay instead of just removing the child from the home. And then we've got some other things as we keep going to fall back on. They're supposed to try to put the child with a family member if they actually have to be removed from the home. If that doesn't work, then they're supposed to try to put the child with a known friend. And so, there's some things in that through our judiciary and rules, and our entire committee last year had raised their hand wanting to work and support that. So the next Friday, a week from today, Judge Ellis will be joining me and Jason Spielman, and we will be presenting that to our committee, and hopefully that'll be a great first step to start to change some of the practices that allow for kids to be removed from the home that probably should not. Again, not to say that some kids should, but we're talking about as best we can to keep our kids in a familiar position while we sort the rest of it out with a questionable parent.
That sounds good. As you were talking, it reminded me, I think the very first time I spoke up at any political event in Idaho was Capital Clarity years ago. The Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan was speaking and talking about the whole Baby Cyrus case. And I asked, so what's the legislature going to do about this? What do you do going forward to fix this? And so that's great to see it, finally getting here where things are getting fixed.
Let's just say that was one example that was in the back of our minds. So, yep. But it's just one part in case anybody say anything. I know you got to go. More has to be done. But we have to remember as Republicans, again, that line upon line, sometimes we try to fix it all at once. It's okay to do it incrementally and make sure that what we do, so this is the approach with this. More to be done. This is a first step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step.
Yep.
Yeah. No, well, appreciate everything you're doing there in the Capitol. I mean, I appreciate your time here. I don't want to keep you all night. It looks like you're still in your office.
Yeah, it's a little messy. Lots of these things lying around.
Yeah. It's that time of year, definitely. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything else you're working on, or where can people follow you and learn more?
Well, I'm working on a newsletter. Hiring help with that. But so at some point, I hope that you'll be able to follow the newspaper. Right now, I try to tweet. Probably not a good tweeter, but I amuse myself. And I think it's like Barbara_Ehart. And then I do still put things on Facebook, but I tend to put a little more on my personal Facebook because all the adversaries go to my political. Well, they try to come to my personal. I make them go off to my political. So you can follow me, get on it. Facebook. I think I'm just Barbara Ehart. I don't know. So, but Brian, thank you so much for, having me on, and just to everyone out there, please know that I am in communication with my colleagues. This is the things we're trying to do. We're not doing by ourselves. We're trying to talk. We're trying to work together. I'm optimistic. Heather Scott is a good friend of mine, and I'll tell you, I really enjoy working with her. I enjoy working with my seatmate Marco, Erickson. But I know that a lot has happened, and there's been a lot of reasons, I think, for us to be frustrated. But one of the things I try to do is I try real hard to do my part to find common ground and bring us together. I really think that our speaker and our leadership, but I'll say our speaker wants change. He's a good man, and he's working, in my opinion, in the right direction. I know some people want change and they want it now. This process by our founders was set up to be deliberate and long. I mean, some of the legislation I'm bringing back, I know it's good legislation. It's like the fourth time I brought it. But because it's good legislation, I'm going to keep working on it while we, do other things. So the best thing, I know I don't get everything right, but I sure try. But keep us in your prayers. I hope I can say that. Keep us in your prayers. This is a journey we're meant to do together, not just us, but all of you. And so that's why I appreciate what you also do, Brian. And I think you're fair. I mean, we obviously we make mistakes, but gosh, if we make that mistake, people around here, we're not Satan. You can by your works you shall know him. And I think a lot of us have some good works, and so just remember that, people. Let's keep each other in our prayers, and let's get this done. A lot more to get accomplished here, and I think we will.
Well, thank you. I'm really optimistic about this session. I'm seeing a lot of good things happening.
Exactly. Me too. Thank you.
All right, Representative Barbara Ehart, thank you, and drive safe back home, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
All right, yeah. So that was Representative Ehart. Always has brings a lot of energy and good ideas to the process. So it has been an hour and 15 minutes. I hope those of you who are still watching are still enjoying the show. I hope it's been informative, educational, interesting, entertaining, maybe even. I will be back here next Friday with another episode, and I'll try and rustle up a couple legislators to come and share their stories. I feel like I've been spending a lot more time in the House. Maybe I'll go find some senators. And thank you to Representative Ehart for taking the time. Thank you to Representative Kaler for taking the time, and thank you to all of you for watching. Reminder, if you're in Pocatello, come see me tomorrow night at the Liberty Dinner. If you're not, then I will see you next week.